Hey friends, this is Dan and you're listening to the NDIS Circle. I had a question today from a woman that I've just hired to come on board at Circle SC as a new coordinator, and she was asking me, can an NDIS service provider ever charge above the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits? And I thought it was an interesting question, and I think to answer that question we have to run through the three different ways of managing your funds and the scenarios and situations where as a participant you might be able to pay a provider above the price limits, and as a provider you might be able to charge that. So there's three different ways of managing an NDIS fund. So there's NDIA managed, plan managed and self-managed. NDIA managed, as a summary, basically means that as a participant you can only use registered NDIS providers, and the service providers will support you as a participant and then send their invoices directly through to the NDIA for payment through the online portal. Plan manager, probably the easiest way to describe it, is that they're sort of an intermediary, like a broker that sits between the participant and the NDIA. They're sort of in the middle there, and when a service provider supports a participant, they'll then send their invoice at the end of the week or the fortnight or the month through to the plan manager. The plan manager is paid by the NDIA, and then the plan manager will then subsequently pay the service provider. So one of the main advantages of plan management is that you can use registered NDIS providers and unregistered NDIS providers. So you've got a little bit more flexibility there. And then the third way of managing your NDIS funds is self-managed. So in keeping with the name, you self-manage your NDIS funding. You can pay registered NDIS providers. You can also use unregistered NDIS providers, and you've got a little bit more flexibility there, but obviously you've got that added sort of administrative burden of having to pay your providers, having to pay your support workers. It's sort of like running a small business. You've got to ensure that tax and super and all that compliance stuff is taken care of as well. The only way of paying your providers above the NDIS pricing arrangements and the price limits, which are updated typically every year, is if you self-manage your funding. So if your NDIS funding is NDIA managed or plan managed, then all the providers that you use are subject to the NDIS pricing arrangements and the price limits. Those prices and it's available on the NDIS website, the NDIA website. You can look up NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits, and all those rates there for different supports, like psychology, I think is $234 an hour in my home state of WA. Specialist support coordination is $190 an hour. Level 2 support coordination is $100 an hour. You can look all those up. They're not a guide, they're actually the limit, the ceiling price. So NDIS providers can charge under that. I don't see a lot of providers charging under that, but that's the limit there. So you can't charge over that if the participant is plan or NDIA managed, but if they self-manage their funding, then a participant gives you that more flexibility to pay a provider. I'm trying to think of a situation where this would apply. Perhaps you found a psychologist. We talked about that rate before. The NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits ceiling rate for psychology in the NDIS in my state of WA is, I think, $234 an hour, something like that. Let's say as a participant you had very unique circumstances, you had a unique disability, or you found someone that was a real niche specialist in their area and you really thought they were super valuable to your support and you were making amazing progress with them, but their rate was $250 an hour. And if you self-manage your funding, that would be a way that you could continue to get that support. You could pay them above the NDIS pricing arrangements. But sort of key to note is that the NDIA and your NDIS plan won't allow for those rates being higher than in the NDIS pricing arrangements. If they fund, say, 12 hours of 12 hours of psychology in your NDIS plan, and they're going to fund it at the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits rate of $234. So if you choose to then pay a provider or a practitioner that is charging above the rate, then obviously it's going to mean that perhaps you get 10 or 11 sessions instead of the 12. But at least you have that choice. If you self-manage, you've got that little bit more control, and perhaps to you having 10 sessions with that psychologist that's a expert in your area and that you have that relationship is worth it, and you get more value out of that than having 12 sessions with someone else that you don't have that relationship with, that perhaps isn't as skilled or experienced, but is charging that slightly lower rate of $234. Thanks for tuning in this week, and it's just a quick one this week, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye.